Okay. Welcome everybody, and good evening, good afternoon, or good morning to everyone joining us today, depending on which corner from the world you are in. My name is Deaconess Joyous, and I will be your MC for our forum today. Today's webinar is sponsored by the iChirp International Interfaith Network, a network of dozens of faith organizations and individuals from around the world who are united in defending human rights in the Philippines. And our webinar today is entitled The Peace Process in the Philippines, the Ecumenical Community, and the Task Ahead. Following the November 2023 announcement by the government of the Republic of the Philippines and the National Democratic Front of the Philippines that they had agreed to come up with a framework that sets the priorities for the peace negotiation with the aim of achieving the relevant socioeconomic and political reforms towards just and lasting peace after the 6-year hiatus of the peace talks. We and the International Interfaith Network were both optimistic at the announcement and reminded of the importance of the previously agreed upon peace agreement to conduct the conduct of the talks and the path towards just and lasting peace in the Philippines. In light of these agreements, it is of utmost importance to say that there are still ongoing violations of international humanitarian law by the Philippine state, impacting communities across the Philippines. Peace consultants from the National Democratic Front remain behind bars. And under the Marcos Jr. regime, the intense repression of the Duterte regime has continued in forms of mass surveillance and arrest, killings of journalists and activists, aerial bombings displacing civilians and destroying land and livelihood. The path towards resumption is a long one ahead. Today, we will review briefly the history of the peace talks between the government of the Philippines and the National Democratic Front since they began in 1986. Look at the role of people of faith, both in the Philippines and internationally, and tirelessly advocating for the two sides to persist with the peace negotiations on the basis of mutually agreed upon principles until a final negotiated peace settlement is achieved, and begin to shed light on some of the important tasks that lay ahead of us as people of faith in this journey towards the resumption of the peace talks. So, as we start, let us ground ourselves in our faith with an opening prayer. We welcome Reverend Israel Banksil from the United Methodist Church, who is currently ministering to migrant workers here in Hong Kong, to offer our opening prayer. Reverend Banksil?
Let us pray. Loving God, thank you for giving us this opportunity to gather as community of faith, longing for peace. Thank you for all the participants and the speakers that we're here today. May you lead us in this fruitful conversation through the guidance of your Holy Spirit. Lead us, dear God, that we may continue to pursue your will and glean the lessons from our conversations tonight. Bless us and open our hearts, our minds, our soul to receive the truths, and may we have the will, determination to seek how to attain peace through your leading. This we pray in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend Banksil. And now we are excited to welcome our main speaker. Following his presentation, we will have a time for question and answers. So feel free to put them in the chat at any time during the presentation, or when we reach that part in our webinar today, you can use the raise hand function and we will call on you to ask your questions live. So let us welcome Bishop Rex Reyes from the Philippine Ecumenical Peace Platform, or the PEPP, and the Ecumenical Bishops Forum. Bishop Reyes is a longtime peace advocate, and during the last round of peace talks, he served as an independent observer to the Joint Monitoring Committee of the Comprehensive Agreement on Respect for Human Rights and International Humanitarian Law, otherwise known as the CARIL. So let us welcome Bishop Reyes. Bishop Rex, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Deaconess. You simplified things by introducing me already, so thank you very much. The task that is set before us is, as the title indicates, churches as catalysts for peace in the Philippines, or in short, how do church people support the GRP and NDFP peace negotiations? Next slide, please, before we go on to answer the question. I have some backgrounders for us. The first slide talks about the situation of unpeace in the Philippines. Before that, let me share with you that I was in high school when martial law was declared. And I have seen in the city where I grew up how difficult it was to have martial law. And it was also during the time when Makliing Dulag, I am an Igorot, by the way, from northern Philippines. And I have encountered this famed man, Makliing Dulag, several occasions. My experience in my college days went on to influence my seminary formation and eventually my entry into the ecumenical movement unto this very day. So my reading of the situation in the Philippines is first and foremost, high prices of inflation. I can feel that very well. My daughter receives a higher salary than I am for a bishop. And the peso depreciation is also there. I think the OFWs will feel that very much. Their families and their relatives in the Philippines. Joblessness and poverty go together very well. You will know why Filipinos, as if they love to travel overseas, to work overseas. But this phenomenon of Filipinos slaving themselves in many, many parts of the world is not fun at all. Well, there are those who can travel because they are capable of traveling. Most of us are forced to travel because there is no job available in this country, despite the fact that we were told that this is a blessed land. Decrepit social services and protection, I can feel that very well. I live here in Manila, and I can sense how it is. The social services protection. I might say that under the current leadership, I am hounded by the spirit of his father. Then extreme inequality, I have seen many parts of my diocese under extreme inequality. I have very wealthy churches. I have very, very poor churches in many, many parts of the diocese. While this is Manila, the reality is I have more disparate members than happy-go-lucky ones. Then, of course, the deficits and the debt problem. Oh, we are going to increase our debt burden. I don't know how much can go farther under the present leadership. Next slide, please. There. Many years ago, Dr. Onofre de Corpus, who was once Secretary of Education and historian by profession, gave us a explanation why there is a state of unpeace in the Philippines. That was 1989. The long neglect of social justice during the elitist politics of the American regime, the deterioration of the civilian bureaucracy since 1946, and the attendant and galloping corruption that was eroding government itself into the late 1980s, meant omission or failure to provide basic services to the lower classes, especially the rural masses. These services were simple. Roads. I have been to stations of my church in Manila, in Metro Manila, where roads are terrible. We have to cross the lake river several times. Good seed, schooling, medical attention, and judicial redress. 2 years ago, 2 men were killed who were members of my church. They are Dumagats. They have been red tagged for almost a year. And then finally, 2 years ago, they were killed. And to this day, nothing has happened. The last time I went to the area, I noticed that they built a huge building there, and it's supposed to be a health center. And I doubt it if they will ever fill that up with anything than health center. Schooling, medical attention, and judicial redress. Their denial to the rural folk institutionalized as social injustice was the foundation of the agrarian unrest since the 1920s. You remember the Hukbalhap movement of its growth into a communist-oriented movement on the eve of World War II, and then of its emergence as a full-blown revolutionary movement in the 50s. That was from Dr. Corpus in 1989. Next slide, please. The United Nations also came out with an assessment, and I quote there, inequitable distribution of productive resources has led to alarming disparities in economic status along populations, no matter the level of growth. This is very easy to see, especially among people who observe the social dichotomy in this country. Next slide, please. We have an organization, an ecumenical formation in the Philippines, which is called the Philippine Ecumenical Peace Platform, PEPP. And mostly church people, Catholics, Anglicans, Protestants, you name it, we have them all. Trinitarian too, these are Trinitarian groups. And then we have the evangelicals, the Philippine Council of Evangelical Churches, then churches associated with the National Council of Churches in the Philippines. Then we have the largest so far, the Ecumenical Bishops, the Roman Catholic Church. Then we have other ecumenical formations like the Ecumenical Bishops Forum, some others. And we have united to come out with this vision for peace. Our vision for the Philippines is a just and enduring peace inspired by the promise of Jesus Christ for an abundant life for all. This is a motto used by my former workplace in the past, the National Council of Churches in the Philippines. It's the popular abundant life for all in John 10:10. And then second, peace goes beyond the silence of guns to the active presence of justice right relationships with others and the rest of creation. It is tangible and manifested through food on the table, decent jobs and wages, clothing, shelter, education, and access to the basic needs. So you see, my friends, it's very, very practical. And then, well, of course, this is from the Old Testament. Peace with justice means people living sustainably in their communities without fear or threat to their lives and livelihood. The scriptures would use the term justice unsparingly to demonstrate the fact that at the heart of the Christian gospel is justice and sustainable living. Next slide, please. There. What you see are members of the armed participants of the armed conflict between the government and a group engaged in a struggle for a new social order, namely, it's called the National Democratic Front of the Philippines. And they have been at it for the last, magre-retire na ako, they're still fighting. I'm worried. And at the rate we are, the other thing that worries me so much is that I may have distant relatives on both sides of the conflict. One who are members of the military and the other one member of the NDF. I always dread the idea of them shooting at each other. It's time to lay down those weapons and talk peace. We cannot go on behaving like we were in the past, going into war with each other. Next slide, please. You have here the story of the peace process. It has a story, by the way. It did not come out of the blue, like it was the agenda of one side, and it was a mutually agreed principles, set of principles that were agreed by both sides of the conflict. We should always bear that in mind when we talk about peace talks. It's not as if there is something new in the peace talks. May kasaysayan po ito. And it started in 86, 87, but that process did not succeed, especially when there was that massacre of the farmers in Minjola. But it was through the initiative of a military general where the more principled conversation for peace talks started. President Ramos in 1992 started the peace process by sending some people to The Hague to talk to the elements of the NDFP to talk peace. And so the same year, mabilis, the Hague Joint Declaration was signed, which was an agreement for both warring parties to talk peace, to sue for peace. Then in 1996, the government of the Republic of the Philippines and the MNLF also had a final peace accord. This was supported by many, many other countries. That's why it prospered that fast. In 1998, the first agreement was signed. The first agreement was the Comprehensive Agreement on Respect for Human Rights and International Humanitarian Law, or in short, CARIL. This was signed during the presidency of Mr. Erap Estrada. And then after that, it was terminated again. The 2000 became worse as even the MNLF accord was under threat, and indeed it went was suspended. 2002 to 2004, the GRP and the NDFP suspended peace talks. So for 3 years. And then in 2004, there was talk of resuming the talks again. But this time, during the time of presidency of Mr. Benigno Aquino, na-suspend yata ulit. Was this the time of Mr. Aquino? Yes. And then, interestingly, during the time of Mr. Duterte, there were new possibilities, high hopes of resuming the peace talks, and in fact, they met several times. And let me say that I had the privilege of observing the processes. I can say that there were honest attempts of the working group, both sides of the working group. The government of the Republic of the Philippines and the NDFP working groups were hard at work really to work on the second agenda. There were 4 agenda pala, no? Just in case I missed on that, but there were 4 agenda. And the second one is economic reforms. At meron na sana eh. There was supposed to be conversation na on economic reforms. But suddenly, the presidency of Mr. Duterte canceled, suspended the peace talks. And we were already, most of us participants were already in Amsterdam at the time, getting ready for the second round, for the fourth round of conversations when we were told that the peace talks will not proceed. Sayang. And now, under the new president, magandang balita, very good news that there was this conversation that they agreed to resume the peace talks. For a while, that got us all agitated very much, because just when we were losing hope that something good will come out, finally, it's going to pass, hopingly. Next slide, please. There are some of the reasons why the peace talks in 2017 was suspended. Number one is terrorist tagging. Of course, some of us will know the difficulty of living with the tag. I was telling you the story of two of the Dumagats members of our church who were killed 2 years ago. They've been red tagged. They were tagged as terrorists when they were actually, what do you call that? Ano bang convoy sa Tagalog? I mean, paid labor would carry load from passengers or passenger jeepneys to the destination for hire. That's all they did, and they were killed. There will be more about this terrorist tagging. We have the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict is the, to me, most notorious among them, similar to the anti-terrorism law of 2020. And of course, the followed immediately after this, the increase in human rights violations and violations of international humanitarian law. Some of you may have heard this ongoing tiff on Hawaii General Bato, the senator, is not so happy with the entry of ICC into the country. But what are they hiding? We have attacks on churches, 17 extrajudicial killings, 5 ministers, including 3 Roman Catholic priests, 12 lay leaders, then illegal arrests. Reverend Nathaniel Valiente is one, Pastor Jimmy Teves, then of course, this man, Aldin Yanez, a youth from the IFI, who has been in jail for a long time already. Some have been charged, like Reverend Lofi Waluntong, also a Methodist pastor. And then the harassment by the military. I remember the case of Reverend Edwin Egar, very it's deep in my memory, how he was released and how we had to hold a press conference to mark his release. Human rights violations continue under President Marcos. It's the same. His policies are no different from that of his dad. Bagong Republika. That's his father said that long time ago. New society. Same policy on peace negotiations, the same thing. To call for the elimination of one side. That's not peace talks. It's calling for the outright elimination of one side of the protagonists instead of talking peace. Next slide, please. You have their statistics under the Marcos and Duterte administrations, 87 extrajudicial killings. But you can see threats, harassment, and intimidation, 1,609,000. Forced evacuations. These are literally most of them in countrysides. And I must say, especially indigenous people, target areas for development are lands protected by indigenous people. They are the stewards of the land, and we do violence to them by persecuting them because we want their land. Next slide, please. Here, political prisoners as of 2023. This was from Karapatan, arrested under Marcos Jr. and Duterte. 84, or a total of 795 total of political prisoners since that time. Notice that there are almost 100 elderly people and 159 women and 98 who are very sickly. And then, of course, NDFP consultants. NDF consultants are part of the peace process. How could you go ahead with the peace process if you arrest them and harass them? Okay, let's proceed to the next slide, please. Here, this is it. This is the joint statement of 23 November. The second paragraph bears our attention. The parties agreed to a principled and peaceful resolution of the armed conflict. Resolution resolving the roots of the armed conflict and ending the armed struggle shall pave the way for the transformation of the CPP, NPA, and NDFP. Diba? Isn't that good news? Who does not want to be transformed? Okay, now there must be a difference between a communique which was released in 28 and the joint statement which was released on the 23rd. The more significant statement is the joint statement of 23rd. The communique was a media announcement, but the underlying principle here is that the both antagonistic parties agreed to talk again. And that is the essence of the resumption of the peace talks. They have not been talking. They have been at each other's, trading barbs with each other, and nobody, it's good to see and to know that they are talking again. And that is the important thing. The next slide, please. So there are talking points in the statement. There are challenges to the peace talks. At the same time, we have to unite as a nation to address issues. No one can claim monopoly of peace process or of peace. It's better for the protagonists to talk about it. Aspiration for principled and peaceful resolution of the armed conflict. This is important, to have a principled and peaceful resolution of the armed conflict. It's not the elimination of one side over the other, but to resolve root causes and end armed struggle to pave the way for the transformation of the CPP, NPA, NDFP. This is another important principal talking point. To remove the root causes and end the armed struggle. These are the key words. And then the fifth one, on framework, set priorities for negotiations for reforms towards a just and lasting peace. We have the four agenda of the peace talks. The third one is political reforms, and the fourth one is the disposition of the forces, what to do with the military of both sides in the end of when the war ceases. Okay, next slide, please. There. What can we do? Well, some of our brothers and sisters, pray is not that enough. Well, of course, there's got to be more than that. We have to do something else, have some action. And Christians are filled with scriptural texts on what to do to bring peace and reconciliation in this country. But for our purpose, what can we do? Create and provide more space for dialogue to expand and strengthen the peace constituency. It includes talking to our congregations and involving them to understand what is the peace process in this country. It's not the agenda of one, it's the agenda of all. And it is not the prayer of one, it is the prayer of all. So when we have more spaces for dialogue, you have meaning for our prayers and the moral suasion to nourish the talks and further pave the way to address the immediate and root causes of the ongoing armed conflict. I say root causes. We have to go through this, the root causes. What is usually played to us are the superficial causes of the conflict, but we should go deep into the root causes, as I discussed earlier. Educate the people on the ground about the peace process and issues related to it. And we are so caught up into this, what do you call it, cell phone thing. It's not enough. We need to have the historical basis, and for Christians, a theological basis for reconciliation and peace and the peace process, and the need for people with misunderstanding to talk. We need to talk. We cannot ignore each other anymore. Too much is at stake. And then, what we have gone through, most of the victims are in many, many parts of the country where there is no access to anything else except themselves, none to protect them at all. And the good thing is that in many, many parts of the country, we have the churches who have opened their doors to become the bastion, sanctuaries, so to speak. And it's a struggle to some, but to open our churches to be a sanctuary for people is a very good witness and an act of service that knows no bounds. Accompaniment, of course, in the New Testament, that's understood as hospitality, when we welcome strangers and host them in our communities and in our homes. We're doing what Jesus would want us to do, especially victims of human rights violations as a result of this ongoing armed conflict. And then last, campaign, help to build and amplify and preserve the gains by the two parties. In those days when we had peace ceasefires, there was peace talaga. There was no fighting, and we can enjoy relative peace at the time. That's why mahalaga yung the role of ceasefires in creating the situation of peace is important. Hindi lang, that's not a game. Talk about ceasefires. It's not a game. Next slide, please. Why do they break the peace process? I don't know. To this day, it dumbfounds me sometimes when it's, ay nako, sinuspende na naman. Why? Why of all the good thing that should happen and then it doesn't happen, something must be wrong with us. And then most of our members are caught up into this world war as if one matters and the other doesn't. That what one says is the absolute truth. How many times have we gone through all of this historically, yet we find out na linoloko pa naman pala tayo in the end? Can Christians affirm what is divine and discover how that affirm is expressed? You know, some churches have also served the very important role of guaranteeing those who are released on recognizance. This is particularly true with political prisoners. Mahalaga po yan. Somebody or a group will pay attention to this group of people. I'm used to my church understanding. Prisoners of conscience, say it's prisoners of conscience. Provide a critical or crucial service and facilities, example by being a depository of official documents like the list of JASIC holders. That is true to some leaders of the NCCP member churches. We have experiences with those. Bridging the role between the panels, negotiations, and other people, except through fora and other activities where representatives of both parties meet the people. You can never run out of topics to talk about when you talk about peace. But we run out of topics when we dismiss the idea of conversations about the peace process. There's just so many to think about. Bridging the role between the panels, and the other people, example, through fora, other activities for representatives of both parties meet the people. Pwede rin naman yun. It can be done. And I think it has been done in many instances. Amplify the issues internationally, international media, governments, government bodies like, you know, this is important because Filipinos are all over the world. The role of Filipinos who work overseas, who have seen the world, is crucial in exercising, putting our government or the NDFP to task for a peaceful solution to our problems in this country. Kaya the support of MILF is strong because other countries support the process between the GRP and the MILF. I wish we had more support for our countries and the NDFP and the GRP peace process. And then go back to what we do most as church people, ecumenical accompaniment. Sanay na tayo dyan. We should know what it means to be in solidarity with each other. Wherever you are, whether you are in Israel or Palestine or in Timbuktu, wherever. A US senator once described the situation in the Philippines. One killing is one too many. Pagka ganyan ang ating actuation, then we can do something else if we we do not allow more killings to go on. Accompaniment, of course, is a deeply theological term among church people. Simply means, you know that story in the Gospel of John, the first Gospel of John, where God came to us through Jesus Christ. The story in the Gospel is that that particular chapter, Jesus did not appear as of just to appear. You know, it's more than that. He lived among us. That is the second thing. Can you imagine mission if he just appeared out of nowhere? But he came with a purpose to live among us, and that is very important for many Christians to live among us. In my seminary days, we were told that we should be living with people, and I thought that was something new because, well, I was taught live for people, but this time it says live with people. There's a whale of a difference, and it makes you a different person if you follow that. And the churches in the Philippines are becoming good at this, building bridges among themselves, among the churches, and so on and so on. So I can rejoice at this development. Next slide, please. Sir, our rally today, resume peace talks. Let us insist on that. Nothing can deter us from pursuing the conversation because something more miraculous can happen when they talk. And rather than spending time, wasting time trying to outdo and kill each other in the process, which is what other agencies are trying to do. Maraming salamat po for your patience. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Bishop Reyes, for such an informative and enlightful presentation and pointing out the importance of the need for education, especially those of us both in the Philippines and also those of us who live outside the country. And so now we will move into a time of question and answers. We already have some that are coming into the chat, so I will work my way through as many of them as possible. So the first question that came in was, many of the younger generation have only ever known the worsening, quote, unpeace in the Philippines and may not see yet why they should be involved in the work for the peace process. What is your message to the younger generation of our church leaders and congregations in relationship to the work for just and lasting peace in the Philippines?
Yes. Well, go to the countrysides. I think many young people are, come to my town in Sagada, for instance. They come to my town, and they get out of town wearing a T-shirt that says "I have survived," and I always ask them, "What have we done to you? What have you survived for? You haven't even understood the issues in my town. You went there to enjoy the beauty of the place, but you never really sat down to talk to the people to understand what's happening in my town. Is that You hardly survived. You did not do anything to merit the survival. You just went outside of our caves and that's it. Uh, uh, the what has been told to us in seminary days remain true today. Learn from the people. Learn from the people. And young people nowadays have the sense of adventure, and it can be done. Studies.
Thank you, Bishop. So our next question, or I guess I should more accurately say questions with an S. So the first part of this three-part question, do we know, are the armed forces of the Philippines committed to the peace, to the resumption of the peace talks?
Some do, some are not. It will take some time to convince, but as a whole, you still have different viewpoints in the army. But I wish they could unite on the idea of finally forging the peace process. Are they not tired of war? I don't know.
It's a very good question. So the next part, we know the current vice president criticized the November joint statement of the peace talks as a capitulation to the enemies. How does this lack of unity in the government leadership affect the prospect of the peace talks?
Well, I remember President FDR was insisting that it is the moral right of the government to initiate the peace talks. And he has been very, very strong on the argument from the very beginning. And I, for one, am solidly convinced that the idea of peace talks was mutual. It was not something given from one side, but both of them agreed to stop fighting and talk peace.
Thank you. And so the government panel, so the government peace panel is made up of new members. Do you and those in PE in the Philippine Ecumenical Peace Platform find them as constructive as the previous panel?
Well, we have to be tested yet. We'll see how it works. But I guess the important thing is both of them are talking. I mean, they're wanting to go for peace talks. So let's keep it that way. Let's keep it high.
Thank you. So the last question that we have, so if you have questions, please again type them in the chat or use the raise hand function in Zoom. Are you following the peace process in other countries for inspiration? For example, the Colombia's current process for total peace.
Yes, I'm reading. Well, we have our member here who is from Colombia, and he keeps us updated on what is going on. But it has its weaknesses, I think. But the Philippine process, I think, is beautiful. It's mutually agreed upon. It it started on those. It had a definite agenda. Those things. We have a gift to contribute to the world.
Thank you, Bishop. Well, the last question in our chat that I'm seeing is an easy one. Is it okay if we share your presentation with those who attended today's webinar so they can educate their friends and church communities?
Sure, by all means. Paano ba to?
We have a list. So the ICHRP International and the ICHRP Interfaith Network will be sharing this then with those who have registered for today's webinar, because we do have their emails.
By all means, let me know and get in touch. Let's continue the conversation. I will be very, very happy to hear from you, your comments and your opinions. Anything for peace process will go.
So our last question is a two-part question. What can you say to the people who say that the peace process shows that the NDFP is weak, or who understand that the peace process means that they're going to capitulate to the government of the Philippines?
No. In fact, that's why we need to go to the peace process, because it's going longer than I thought. We have to put an end to this war, because I'm about to retire, my friends. And I presented this presentation by saying I was in high school when this whole concept germinated in my young mind. This war has been going on for a long, long time with so many faceless victims, you may say. But from a Christian perspective, these are also the faces of Christ.
Thank you, Bishop. Okay, friends, this is let us thank Bishop Rex Reyes for his insightful sharing and education, bringing us up to speed on the current peace process. If you have any additional questions, please send those to the GRP Interfaith Network, and we will get those answered and shared with you.
Thank you very much. Mabuhay po tayong lahat. Long live.
Thank you, Bishop Reyes. Now, as we are nearing the end of our time together, and beginning to think about what is next, let us welcome Reverend Chris Ferguson. Reverend Ferguson is ordained in the United Church of Canada. He is the formal General Secretary of the World Communion of Reformed Churches and is currently an international professor for peace and justice at the Reformed University in Columbia. Chris.
Thank you very much, and thanks everybody for participating. I think just to recall that our holding this webinar was within the framework of our Ecumenical Interfaith Forum of iChurch. And in that, we understand our job is to bring the interfaith ecumenical distinctive work and witness into the overall goals of iChurch and in support of the fulfillment of full and complete human rights in the Philippines. Right now, we have from the meeting we had last year in Thailand, we were able to set out a framework of what contribution we thought that this group should make. And pretty well at the same time we were meeting, this November declaration emerged, which told us that we had to, and not only was the peace declaration upon us, but the whole framework of our meeting was about the peace we seek, continuing to lift up and go farther than simply responding to the increasing and deepening human rights violations, but to look at their root causes and addressing them towards peace. So this, right now, my part is to say what then are the conclusions after understanding what is going on with the call to resume the peace talks, or the commitment to resume the peace talks on both sides, and how does that fall within our priorities and the things we are already committed to. So I've summarized this in a number of points that have coming from the ecumenical interfaith actors in the Philippines and drawing on Father Rex's point. First of all, this the first call to action is to under the the title of Resume the Peace Talks is for our work we will undertake to reframe all advocacy and educational action around the urgent need to reactivate the peace process for the resolution of the armed conflict based on justice and addressing root causes. In other words, we will continue to focus on issues like the anti-red tagging campaign, focusing on the violations of international human rights law and so on, but always pointing to the fact that these violations and the things that must be put in place to stop the killing and to respect human rights can only be addressed through the vehicle of resumed peace talks. So it's a question of not changing what we're doing, but taking a Bishop Rex understanding, and the word from the ecumenical community is to now always make a tight connection between the call for serious peace talks that address root causes and continuing to focus on ongoing human rights violations and see them as part of a peace in our campaigns. So we link all calls to end red tagging, etc., to the imperative for a peace process, and that always is understanding that it is a process that is built on past agreements and gains. So we're not talking about starting something from zero in all our lifting up our issues, the way we talk about it, the way we speak to our constituencies, and our government insists on keeping past agreements. So again, the focus on international humanitarian law violations and ending them is understanding that the solution is a negotiated peace. That in the imagination of what we're hearing today then is we understand that our undergirding in our call to action is to always favor non-military negotiated solutions to any problems. We've also understood that our call to action is always a call to all actors. As Rex says, that the uniqueness of the process is this isn't only calling one side to a table, but supporting the existence of a table that was created by both sides, and emphasize prayer and spiritual report to actions that nurture the path to peace, addressing immediate and root causes. In other words, that in our advocacy, we are being called now, our call to action is to always have put forward an analysis about root causes together with a description of the immediate crises. And people will find in their advocacy work support for in the iChirp's Investigate PH report that has foundational analysis about root causes. So a priority, therefore, in our call to action is to making visible the reality in the Philippines through education in our constituency about the peace process and the imperative for negotiations and dialogues based on justice in international law. So priority around education that both makes visible what's going on and makes visible a very hopeful possibility of forward movement. The last point is simply to say that our call to our group, therefore, is to undertake a deeper dialogue with the interfaith ecumenical community in the Philippines to support the development of an action plan for us that locates specifically what is the international, ecumenical, and interfaith plan for 2024. What are the specific things that we need to do, integrating our already ongoing campaigns about red tagging, international humanitarian law, and solidarity with victims, plus the issues that Rex is bringing to us today. How we specifically need to amplify these issues internationally. What are the specific tasks this year for international ecumenical accompaniment? within the global and national ecumenical communities. Father Rex or Bishop Rex has indicated ideas like an international ecumenical conference on peace and so on. So the other previous points I've made are about the orientation of our advocacy and education outwards. This last point is a task for us, is an immediate call to reformulate our 2024 action plan to look at what are the peace imperatives that should be present in this plan.
Yep.
Thank you, Reverend Ferguson, and thank you again to Bishop Rex for laying out such a clear outline of the education and specific tasks that lay ahead of us. Friends, this brings us to the end of our program, but definitely not the end of our work together. For our work towards working for just and lasting peace in the Philippines and addressing the root causes is for sure an ongoing journey. Our work in 2024, as Reverend Ferguson has laid out, is even more vital in the work for just peace. And we look forward to working with all of you here today and to those who joined with us in spirit and prayers to the many different time zones that we all live in. So maraming salamat po. Thank you all. And
Thank you very much. Thank you very
good
much.
night, good morning, good afternoon.